Good afternoon. We're back with more Marvel Champions, and today will be a card review of the Ant-Man Hero Pack. This will be the first Hero Pack of the second cycle for the game. The first after the Rise of the Red Skull story box. So let's take a look. Ant-Man Scott Lang has two different hero forms. He has his giant form and his tiny form. And when you are in Alter Ego, you can choose to flip to Tiny or Giant. When you are in Tiny, you can choose to flip to Alter Ego or Giant. And when you're a Giant, you can choose to flip to Alter Ego or Tiny. So you don't necessarily have to change to Alter Ego when you want to change forms. His Tiny form has 2 thwart, 1 attack, 2 defense. And the response after you change to this form, remove 1 threat from a scheme. Standard hand size of 5 and 12 hit points, hand size of 6 in Alter Ego. And his Alter Ego response is after you change to this form, heal 1 damage from Scott Lang. Essentially Recovery 4. A little bit better than Recovery 4 because you don't have to exhaust to use it. And then Giant Ant-Man has 1 thwart, 3 attack, 3 defense, and the response after you change to this form, deal 1 damage to an enemy. Well, pretty balanced stats. Clearly the tiny Ant-Man is more focused on removing threat and the large Ant-Man is more focused on damage. His stats are fine for threat removal. His stats are great for damage. I like this hero so far. But what I'm looking for in a hero in order to say that this hero is strong is primarily threat removal. Throughout the first cycle of the game, from the core set up until now, the heroes that I've covered, the strongest are Captain America and Doctor Strange, and each one of them has the ability to remove threat efficiently. Threat removal in general is terribly inefficient right now in the game. In fact, I would say that is the primary source of difficulty, because what you would like to consider threat removal to be efficient is to get 2 threat removal per resource spent. And that is hard to come by, nearly impossible. Virtually none of the Justice cards offer you 2 threat removal for 1 resource. It's much more common to get 1.2 or 1.5 if you're lucky. You take the card for Justice, which you have to pay 2 cost for and spend the card, essentially removing 3 cards from your hand in order to get 3 threat removal, or 4 if one of them is a science resource. Let's take a look at the Justice cards, and just a quick look at the Justice cards to illustrate what I'm talking about. So here we have all of the Justice cards that are available. We get 2 threat removal from this Clear the Area for 1 cost plus the card. So you remove 2 cards from your hand and you get 2 threat removal. For Justice, you get 3 threat removal, but you have to remove 3 cards from hand. To consider this card efficient, you would like 6 threat removal. Stealth Strike, 2 threat removed, costs 3 plus the card. Interrogation Room is one of the only efficient ones, but you have to defeat a lot of minions to make it efficient. Surveillance Team, remove 3 threat, costs 2 plus the card. Prevents 3 threat, costs 2 plus the card. So you can see that the cards that remove threat are terribly inefficient. Now when you compare that to Aggression, you can get 6 damage for 3 plus the card. It's a little more efficient. If you play something like Hercules, you can get 9 damage plus a chump block, and depending on how much you spent for the card, that can be very good value. Hulk gives you 3 per attack, depends on how many attacks you get with the Hulk. Damage in general is much more efficient than threat removal, and defense isn't that efficient, but chump blocking is very efficient. So As in Lord of the Rings LCG, the primary difficulty involved in these quests is typically establishing a stable board state, and you do that in two ways. Number one, controlling the boss or minion attacks, and number two, controlling the threat. Now, controlling the boss or minion attacks you can do fairly efficiently. Controlling the threat you cannot. And so the heroes that are top tier right now, Doctor Strange and Captain America and Iron Man, they are top tier because they control threat efficiently. Doctor Strange has Images of Icon, which removes 4 threat for 1 cost plus the card. And, well, 1 cost plus, you don't have to spend the card, it comes from the invocation deck, but 1 cost plus exhausting Doctor Strange gives you 4 threat removal and a confusion. Then you have his, what's it called? Astral Projection, which removes 3 threat for 2 cost plus the card, which isn't that efficient, but then you do get additional threat removal for boost icons, which can boost it up by 0 to 3 basically. So Doctor Strange has threat removal cards that are far better than what are offered in the Justice aspect, and far better than most heroes offer. If you compare that to like Spider-Man, who only has his Spider Tracer, or something like Hawkeye, who only offers his Cable Arrow, which removes 3 threat but costs 1 plus the card. Doctor Strange has strong threat removal, and Captain America has strong threat removal with Fearless Determination, which boosts his thwart to 3, and then you can thwart twice in 1 round. And then he also offers the ally Agent 13, who's very good at thwarting and comes with a lot of value. So anyway, that's a long-winded explanation for why we're looking for threat removal primarily in order to determine how strong a hero is in solo play. Because if you have strong threat removal, then you can go with the leadership aspect and you will have strong threat removal and you can control the boss's attacks. And you will be able to clear scenarios fairly easily. If you do not have strong threat removal, then you will struggle anytime these scenarios stack up a lot of threat against you, which happens a lot in Expert and really happens a lot in Heroic. So far we have the tiny Ant-Man, who can remove 1 additional threat in addition to his 2 thwart. That's a good start. We don't mind switching forms with Ant-Man. We do mind it typically because you don't want to switch to Alter Ego very often in True Solo because, as I mentioned, threat removal is not efficient. And if you switch to Alter Ego in True Solo and get a lot of threats stacked up against you, which happens because the boss schemes, you will not be able to remove it efficiently, and you'll get snowed under and lose more often than not. So on the higher difficulties in True Solo, we want to stay in hero form as much as possible. So if we had to switch to Alter Ego and then back in order to take advantage of this threat removal, it would not be very good. But we don't have to do that. We can switch between different hero forms to take advantage of this. So we get 1 threat removal every other turn, basically, if we switch every turn. That's not exceptional, but it's a good start. It's a start. And so let's take a look at the rest of the Ant-Man cards and see if we can find any threat removal. We've got the Wasp. This is his ally. 3 cost, 2/2. After Wasp enters play, deal 2 damage to an enemy if you are in giant hero form, or remove 2 threat from a scheme if you are in tiny hero form. So you can get 6 threat removal for 3 plus the card, so 4. And then a chump block. It's good. It's a good value ally. I like it. Yeah, I mean, it's strong. It's nothing exceptional. It's not approaching Hawkeye levels or Maria Hill levels or even Brawn, but it's solid, definitely above average. We've got Giant Stomp. Play only if you're in giant hero form. Deal 1 damage to each minion, deal 8 damage to an enemy. So we're spending 3 plus the card from our hand. 4 cards leave the hand. In exchange we get 8 damage. That's 2 for 1 on its own. That's good. And then 1 additional damage to each minion That's bonus. This is a very strong damage card. One of the best damage cards in the game. I would compare it to Iron Man's Supersonic Punch, which costs only 2 but doesn't deal 1 damage to minions, and you have to go aerial first. I think this compares favorably. Very strong damage card. May even be the best damage card in the game. This is a very good start for Ant-Man, at least damage-wise, but we're still looking for threat removal. A strong damage hero will at least make Ant-Man a good multiplayer hero, because you can have another player do the threat removal. But yeah, we're off to a good start damage-wise. Hive Mind, 2-cost event, play only if you are in tiny hero form. Remove 2 threat from a scheme, remove 1 additional threat from that scheme for each army of ants support you control. So for its base value, you get 2 threat, you have to spend 2 resources and the Hive Mind, so 3 cards out of your hand for 2 threat, that's terrible. If you can remove, so there's 3 army of ants in the deck, if you had all 3 of them out, that would be 5 threat removal. For 3, it's close to good, but that's a lot of setup that this requires. This is likely to be on the weak side a lot. It's likely to be kind of 1-for-1 a lot, which is not good. If you can get more than 1-for-1, it's more or less equivalent to Justice cards, but you'd hope for something stronger from your hero cards. Overall, a little disappointing as far as threat removal goes. And if this is going to be another damage-focused hero, that'll be a little disappointing because we already, in the last cycle, had Thor and Hulk. They were not good heroes, but they were trying to be damage-focused, and so I don't know if Ant-Man just ends up being a damage-focused hero, but he's better than Thor or Hulk. That'll be something. It might be enough to recommend buying the hero pack, but kind of hoping for each time I review a hero to find another elite hero. And so far, this threat removal is not that good. It's not that good. And I suspect it's not that good because he already has threat removal built into his hero form, but I don't really like nerfing one card because another one is strong in the hero set as a philosophy. You see that in card games a fair amount. I've never really liked it. How many Hive Minds do we get? Just 1 Hive Mind? Oof. Okay. Resize, change to your other hero form, draw 1 card, so you get either 1 damage or 1 threat removal and a card draw for no resources. That's a great card. Very, very strong card. I'd imagine you'll want to use that, because this doesn't count as your 1 changing form per round, so yeah, you'll want to use this every single time you draw it. Every time. This will never get spent as a resource, or almost never. It's a very efficient, very strong card. And you get 3 of them. That's great. How many giant stomps? 2 giant stomps? Okay. Pim Particles. After you spend this card, heal 2 damage from your hero if you are in giant hero form, or draw 1 card if you're in tiny hero form. That's another great card. I mean, that is just all value, no downside at all. Very strong card for this set. So 2 out of the 3 cards, or 3 out of the 4 cards that we've looked at have been very strong, very good value cards. The only lackluster one was the threat removal, which is predictable because every threat removal, almost every threat removal that I've seen in the game so far has been inefficient, which is where most of the difficulty in the scenarios comes from right now in True Solo. Army of Ants. It's a support card. If you are in tiny hero form, exhaust Army of Ants, deal 1 damage to an enemy. So you get it out for 1 plus the card, so it costs 2 basically, and then you get 1 damage per turn. Basically you need 6 turns to make this good. It combos with the threat removal, but the threat removal is weak without it, so I wouldn't really consider that a bonus to the card. This definitely is good in long games. It's a little weak if you draw it late game, but it's definitely good in long matches, and there are some of those in solo, like Red Skull was a long match. Ultron can be very long, and this would be very good against the Ultron drones. So I consider this high upside, weak in the short run. You get 3 of them. After you, Ant-Man's helmet, 3 cost. After you change to giant hero form, heal 2 damage from your hero. After you change to tiny hero form, draw 1 card. So you get this out, and you basically need to flip to giant hero 3 times to make it decent, or 2 times to tiny form. That's not that hard with your resize card. You're going to get a lot of value out of this in long games. Ant-Man is now shaping up to be like an Iron Man-esque hero that really loves long games and has extremely high value in long games. Iron Man, the strongest hero in the core set, and Ant-Man looks like a very strong hero. If you are in a short-run situation, short-term situation, such as, well, like the strategy that I used to defeat Zola, like a 9-minute game, the big size, giant size looks good for that, with the giant stomp, the 3 attack, the 3 defense. In a longer game, it looks like tiny form gives you more value overall, and the value upside is very high, but still no threat removal and no ability to ready Ant-Man, which is another thing that we're looking for. And primarily that second ready gets used to deal with these big threat bombs that come out from time to time, like a master plan or multiple side schemes that come out if you're playing on heroic mode, or if you're been dealt a second encounter card because of an expert mode card, or because you cycled through your deck. Like, how do you deal with a threat bomb is going to be a huge issue that you look at when you're trying to determine if you're going to be able to play through quests solo on heroic mode, because you get 2 encounter cards, or even 3 per turn if you want to play heroic 2. And you may be looking at these heroes and wondering, if I buy the hero, will I be able to play on higher difficulties than I have played before? And so far with Ant-Man, the answer to that question is no, because he still doesn't have a way. He does not have a way to deal with large threat bombs yet. But let's take a look at the remaining cards. After you change to giant hero form, you get +1 attack until the end of the turn. This is an upgrade. Okay, so you need to take advantage of that 4 times. That's a little bit harder. You might not have 4 instances where you switch to giant hero form and then basic attack. It may take quite a long time for that to happen. So this is a card that could potentially sometimes just get spent as a resource. Probably if you get it like turn 1, you'll want to use it. Mid to late game, it'll become more of a question, a judgment call about whether this should get spent as a resource or played. But in the early game, it's good, it's cheap. It's not as strong as the cards that have come before it, but it's alright. It's more of a question, more of a judgment call about whether this is going to be something you want to play or not. And finally, we have Wrist Gauntlets, a 1-cost upgrade. If you're in giant hero form, exhaust Wrist Gauntlets and spend 2 strength resources to stun. If you're in tiny, exhaust and spend 2 lightning resources and confuse. So you're paying 1 cost plus the card, and then you can spend 2 resources and stun an enemy. This seems stronger than it is, I think. Repeatable stun whenever you want seems pretty strong, but the cost is high. The cost is really high. Basically, 4 cards for your first stun is terrible. It'll be 6 for your second stun, 8 for your third, let's see, 10 for the fourth, 12 for the fifth. This probably becomes good after you stun the boss. I don't know, 6 or 7 times. After 6 or 7 stuns, I will say you would have gotten good value out of this card. Because that 2 strength resources, I think that's a much higher cost than it seems like. But the ability to crowd control is one of the things we're looking for from an elite hero. Nonetheless, I am, at first glance, a bit disappointed in the hero's threat removal. As all he really has that's efficient is the form swapping, and he doesn't have any ability to ready himself to double thwart. And his one threat removal card is lackluster without 3 copies of Army Advance in play. And Army Advance is certainly going to be a card you want to play on its own and almost never throw away. But it is an early game card, so right now it looks like Ant-Man is a good hero if you get him set up fairly quickly, but not as much if you don't, and therefore will be less consistent than something like Captain America and may struggle to deal with threat bombs on higher difficulties. But let's continue and look at the other cards that come with the Ant-Man Hero Pack. There is his Nemesis, and here we have Ant-Man Hank Pym. Okay, 0 cost, 2 thwart, 2 attack, 0 hit points, gets +1 hit point for each Pym counter. When he enters play, place 1 Pym counter on him to a maximum of 4 for each resource you overpaid. So if you pay 3, you get 4 thwart and a chump block for 3 resources plus the card. It's fine. It's not as strong as Wasp was as an ally. Its value comes from its versatility, not from its stats. You could use it as an emergency chump blocker for just 1 cost. It's still not, I don't think it's good value at any cost. Its value is in the versatility, and how much value do I give to that versatility? I don't know. I'd have to try it out. It has some value because sometimes it's going to allow you to use resources that you didn't have a use for otherwise. And that will be good in that situation. In other situations where you did have a use for the other resources, like another ally, this is a leadership ally, Ant-Man will get spent as a resource. So, inconsistently decent, never exceptional, often mediocre would be my assessment of Hank Pym. Giant Man, 5 cost. I do not like 5 cost allies. It's very hard to get them on the table when you're in hero form, and you want to be in hero form most of the time in true solo. 2 thwart, 2 attack, 4 HP, gets 2 attack plus 2 attack while he has 3 or more remaining hit points. So his first and second attacks will be for 4. So you get 4, 8, 9, 10 plus the chump block. It's good value. It's just it's so hard to get a 5 cost ally on the table. You may need Quinjet to make that happen. If you can get him on the table, he offers decent value, not exceptional value, but decent value. So if you have a way to reliably play 5 cost allies, he offers decent value for the cost. I don't think I'd run him in true solo though, because that 5 cost is so hard to pay in solo. It's easier in multiplayer where you can switch to alter ego more often. Ronin, 3 cost, 1 thwart, 2 attack, 3 health, gets +1 thwart and +1 attack while an upgrade is attached to him. He's mediocre without an upgrade attached to him. I don't like upgrades in true solo because I think to get high value out of upgrades you really need to be able to heal your allies with the upgrades on them. So upgrades pair well with protection. They don't do that well value-wise in true solo, and so this is again not a hero, not an ally that I would run in true solo. So far, pretty mediocre additions to the leadership aspect, and that's understandable because leadership has been quite strong in the past, doesn't really need any help at the moment. Nonetheless, you hope for good cards when you buy a new hero pack, and so far Ant-Man looks strong in some ways, weak in the traditional way of thwarting, and the aspect cards, at least the allies, aren't that good. Stinger, Cassie Lang. 1 cost, 1 thwart, 1 attack. 2 health. Play only if your identity has the Avenger trait. Stinger does not count against your ally limit. So you get 1 thwart or 1 attack and a chump block. It's good value. It's good value even if you don't take into account that she doesn't count against your ally limit. I'd play this card. It's a strong ally. I'd include this in almost any leadership deck. Urgency chump blocker. I like it. And you get 1 thwart. Yeah, it's good value. Not exceptional, but it's good. Call for Aid. 0 cost, discard cards from the top of your deck until you discard an Avenger ally, then add that ally to your hand. No, I don't really like this card. Discard from the top of your deck. If the first card that you discard is an Avenger's ally, then this card is great. Anything more than that, I think. You don't have the option of stopping once you start discarding. So what if you discard like 10 cards and then you're just, like 25% of the way to dealing yourself an additional encounter card? I don't think this card offers that much value. Moxie. 0 cost. After you change form, your hero gets +1 thwart, +1 attack, and +1 defense. No, that's not much value. Unless you could, even if you could use it multiple times, it's barely adequate. So I wouldn't run this. And you have to change form in order to use it. Even if you didn't have to change form, it would barely offer adequate value. Power Gloves, 1 cost upgrade attached to an Avenger ally. I don't really like attachments for allies in solo play. After attached ally attacks or thwarts, deal 1 damage to an enemy. Not going to offer enough in solo to use it, at least not without healing. So maybe in Spider-Woman you could run an allies plus attachments deck, maybe. I think it would be hard to make it work. But otherwise, no. Just doesn't offer enough unless you can heal the allies. You can use First Aid, but I think you need to reliably be able to keep an ally on the table and attacking every round. Because you're spending 1 resource plus you're losing Power Gloves from your hand. You need to get like 4 uses out of this just to make it decent. More would be better. That's hard if you don't have really consistent healing. Reinforced Suit, another upgrade. Attached to an ally, max 1 per ally. Attached ally gets +2 hit points. No, it's not very good. Without healing, at least. Even with healing, I don't think this is very good. You spend this card plus 1 resource and you get 2 hit points. I mean, I guess you could get 4 in value from that. If you get 2 attacks for 2 and you spent 1 card plus the ally, it's okay. If you could get 3, like with Hercules or something like that, that would be good. But of course you can't do that in solo. Are there any leadership allies that this would work well with? At best, it's adequate. So, nothing I would use a card slot on, I don't think. Now that we got more and better cards available, I'd probably prefer to run 1 or 2 or 3 more allies than to run Reinforced Suit. First Aid we've seen before. Swarm Tactics. First team-up card that I've covered. Team up Ant-Man and Wasp, max 1 per deck. Change to your other hero form, ready your hero. Well, it's great if you're running Ant-Man and the Wasp heroes. You won't be doing that in solo. So if you have to have Ant-Man and the ally Wasp on the table to make this work, I think that isn't going to happen often enough to run Swarm Tactics. I don't know. You could run one of. So what is the value of this? You get 1 damage or 1 threat removal, and then you get to ready your hero. So that's like 3 in value roughly. For 1 cost plus the card. No, it's not that good. Yeah, it's really pretty lackluster. Even if you didn't have the team up requirement, I probably wouldn't run this. Energy, Genius, Strength, Team Building Exercise, 2 cost support, Exhaust. Play a card from your hand that shares a trait with your hero, reducing its resource cost by 1. If you could do this 6 times, this would be good. That will be hard to do unless you play it very early. Most of these basic cards have been, nearly every basic card that I've reviewed has been among the weaker cards in the game, with the possible exception of War Machine, maybe Mockingbird or Nick Fury, and the resource generators. But other than that, basically no basic cards get played, and this is really no exception. Now we're into the other aspect cards. Moment of Triumph. After you attack and defeat an enemy, heal 1 damage from your hero. For each point of excess damage dealt to that enemy by that attack. Well, you need to deal like 2 excess damage to make this worth it. So that's going to be against a minion, not a boss, because you don't generally deal excess damage to a boss. I don't think you generally want to deal excess damage to minions. You'd rather that damage go on the boss. I suppose as emergency healing it could serve. And you can make it work. It's not easy. You basically need like an attack for 3. And not a lot of heroes can attack for 3. Ant-Man can do it. Hulk, Thor, I forget now. Ant-Man in giant form. But you have to do some setup to make this just adequate, and so yeah, I don't really like that. For adequate, we'd like it to be easy, and I don't think this is easy, and its upside isn't high enough. Lay down the law. 1 cost event. After you change form, remove 3 threat from a scheme. 4 instead if you paid for this card using a science resource. Okay, this is among the. This would be, I think, the most efficient threat removal in the Justice scheme. Probably works best with Ant-Man, but works good with any hero. After you change form, if you get 4 threat removal from this for 1 cost plus the use of the card, it's not exceptional if you compare it to damage cards or allies, but it's exceptional compared to other threat removal. This is like Doctor Strange's Images of Icon removes 4 for 1 cost, but you have to exhaust Doctor Strange to use it generally. You do get a Confuse as well. This is a great addition to the Justice card and sorely needed in the game. This a great addition to the Justice aspect and sorely needed. More cards like this, more heroes with cards like this would be great and would enable us to make some progress on higher difficulties. We'll try out Ant-Man with the Justice aspect just because of this card, I think. And we'll also try out Ant-Man with the standard leadership aspect. We'll probably play him against Red Skull on Expert and possibly Zola and just see how he does. Muster Courage. 3 cost, play only if you have Avenger. Give up to X friendly characters a tough status card to a maximum of 3, where X is equal to the villain's stage number. So if you play it early, it's bad. If you play it in stage 2, I think it's adequate, it's decent. If you play it in stage 3, it's exceptional. Not every quest has a stage 3 or even a stage 2. But for those that do, and you find yourself getting into stage 2, I think you need to get into stage 3 really to make this good. If you're in stage 1, you'll always throw this away or use it to pay for something else. If you're in stage 2, you'll sometimes use this. I don't think you'll use it that often. You'll probably be wanting to spend this 3 resources on an ally or something like that. In stage 3, it gets used more. If we compare this to Doctor Strange's card, Doctor Strange's card gives toughness to 3 characters for 1 cost, plus exhausting Doctor Strange. Yeah, this card costs too much to include it in a protection deck, I think. Except in very specific scenarios where you predictably get to stage 3 often and have some challenge to overcome there. Assess the situation. You get +1 hand size until the end of the phase. Until the end of the phase? I don't understand how that's helpful, because you don't draw until the end of the round. Or wait, no. You do draw at the end of the phase, right? At the end of the hero phase is what it means. Not until the end of the turn. It says until the end of the phase. So basically, draw 1 extra card at the end of the phase just for this round. That's good value. 0 cost for that is good value. Not exceptional. Well, it's pretty good. It just cycles itself. And so it'll reduce the size of your deck from 40 to 37. Making you draw your good cards more often. This is a good card in a game which is short on good cards. If you have plentiful good cards, you'll probably want to use this slot on one of those other good cards. But if you've built your deck and you've run out of good cards or cards that you think are strong, in that deck you can throw Assess the Situation in there and get penalized less than using some other, crappy card that you're shoehorning in because you don't have anything else. So it depends on how strong your collection is, I guess, in terms of whether this gets run or not. But a card that shrinks the size of your deck, it's good. If you don't have enough good cards, it's good. And I think that's it. So overall, I like Ant-Man a lot more, having seen Lay Down the Law. However, it does come with the caveat that you have to run Justice with him. But, potentially, if you combine Lay Down the Law with Ant-Man's tiny responsibility, there's potential there. I don't know if he's going to match Doctor Strange or Captain America, but there's potential there. He could at least potentially get to the level of Spider-Woman or Black Widow or Iron Man. But we'll have to test him out to be sure. So, one thing to note about Ant-Man, which I completely missed in my original take, and I'm adding this bit at the end later, is that Giant Ant-Man has a hand size of only 4. So that does change the evaluation of Ant-Man. Hand size of 4 is a pretty intense limitation for a hero when we've seen that in the past. The heroes that have a hand size of 4, Thor or Hulk, that is very limiting. So what that means is in playing Ant-Man, we're going to want to stay in tiny form a lot of the time. Now, tiny form is where most of the damage comes from anyway, because tiny form has access to Army of Ants damage. So how much does this change the champion? I still think he's S tier. I'd downgrade him to maybe S minus. Maybe A plus, but I think S minus. And primarily I think that because he has the ability to scale up well with Army of Ants. And Giant Form, given that the hand size is only 4, we're probably not going to want to be in Giant Form that much unless it's to resize or unless we're flipping there to do a big damage turn with like some Giant Strength or what's the other card? Giant Stomp. Otherwise, we're going to want to stay in Tiny Form most of the time. The good news is Tiny Form does have 2 defense. It does have 2 less attack, though, so there will be occasional times to flip into Giant, but we're going to want to stay in Tiny at least until getting set up with 2 or 3 Army of Ants and preferably Ant-Man's helmet as well. So that is an important note that I originally missed, and I'm adding this part later in order to make a note of it because it is important and does change the way that the hero plays. So, thank you for watching.